Man,
What have you done for us lately?
You got a lot of heat, don't you?
I've blamed the weather on Mayor Daley this summer. But do you remember the day that McCormick Place burned down?
Very well.
You were so eloquent that day in urging strongly the distributors not to move out of Chicago. You spent almost all day. That was one of the most impressive one-man campaigns that I can ever remember hearing on the air. Do you remember that day?
We really got into it that day. That was exciting. That was proof of what radio can do.
Yes.
And we felt desperately that all those people who had the space, since the hardware show generates most of their business here in Chicago at that show. Yes, I remember saying, go over to the Hilton Hotel on the 3rd floor if you're this group and that group. It was fabulous. It was just after that we had that huge snowstorm. Do you remember the snowstorm?
No, I can't remember that.
And we did the same thing on the snowstorm, helping pregnant women get to the hospital on snowmobiles.
Speaking of pregnant women, Jack? Hey, quick up.
Jack, I didn't see you sitting back there.
Yeah, Jimmy. Save it for the second drink. I just want to say Mel was a super job. And also, I want to congratulate you on getting WCFL all the way up to $62.50 a week. You could never have done it.
We had to go right to the picket lines to do it.
You.
Billy Leach.
Oh, yeah. Mal, thanks for a swell talk today.
Take me back too. We spent a lot of time together at WBBM. I was sort of your second banana.
Yes, you were.
Yeah. First time I met you, though, was in 1950. It was a softball game, and I hit a line drive over your head, which you never forgave me.
I played right field because that's where nobody plays who's any good at it. I was never an athlete, and you hit that. That was miserable.
You stay well, old friend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. You know, he still wears the same pork pie hat.
You still drive a Porsche. I hated Billy Leach because here we were working like mad, and here is Billy Leach, the world's oldest juvenile, driving a Porsche to work.
4-score-and-4.
Fantastic, fantastic. Anybody else out there?
Well, I've got a couple of things. I don't remember now with, you were doing lit jewelers, I think.
I sure was. I saw more schlocky
Schlock,
diamond
yeah.
rings than,
Put it on.
Yes, I did.
Those diamond rings that they had to put under a microphone and they zoom in on them. Yeah,
Yes, indeed, I did.
I think one of the classic hilarisms, well, not only that, but I used to get calls from Al, and they would call, they wanted to speak to Mabel Ayers. I kept saying, she's not here. I was doing a music wagon, I think it was, and Mal used to give recipes every day for the people. Billy, I'm sure, yes. So he says, the recipe for today is something that you're all going to love. It's real easy to do. And we're going to make porcupine balls. Well, that was the last time you heard the band, the singers. The only thing you could... And then he had the audacity to say, okay, Al, go ahead and play. Well, Cartman's hands are paralyzed. Nobody, Porky, I guess, on the trumpet couldn't,
He was under the piano.
yeah. Porky Panico, the singer, and the only thing you could hear was, I could go on with many more, but being circumspect now.
Alan was the producer on the radio show Lucky Ladies that I'm in, that followed your Shopping with the Missus, where we would go out to grocery stores and interview women. Sometimes we'd find 2 women. Sometimes we'd find 202 stomping on each other. It was a wild show. But that in-grocery store show was also one of the great things that let me meet people, people who evidently would remember. I had one stock little gimmick that I used. I would see a pregnant woman and say, all right, what do you want, a boy or a girl? And she'd say a boy. I'd say, touch me on the left shoulder, right on?
Yeah.
To this day, I have these grown-up people walking back and saying, my mother touched your shoulder. They've got kids. We had some great time. We gave away a lot of silver dollars, too.
Oh,
At Thomas J. Webb Coffee.
Thomas J. Webb Coffee.
Is it true that you're the secret owner of the White Fence Farms?
Let me tell you about that. I got a call in my office from a lady who identified herself as Doris Hastert, and she said, we're interested in advertising. Would you come out and see us? And I said, I will bring one of our station reps. And so Mel Pinzell, one of the all-time greats, along with Don Mann. Yeah, Mel Pinzell and I drove out to White Fence Farm way out south. And in the morning, 9 o'clock, they wheeled out a table and we had fried chicken and hot corn fritters. And that started 20 years of a relationship with them. We never had an agency, never had a writer. I would call Doris and say, Doris, that commercial's beginning to bore me. And she'd say, okay, do another one. I'd say, anything special? She'd say, no, just go ahead. We went on 20 years that way. And to this day, after almost 50 years in this business, when I go out, I'm identified with hot corn fritters and fried chicken.
Is the Hastert in Congress? Mal, is the Hastert in Congress from that family?
Yes, yes he is. He's right out that way. Bob and Doris are getting on in years now. They gradually turned the business over to his son, young Bob. He runs it now, and it's been a tremendous success for them. I used to tell them, why don't you come and open a place up on the northwest side? It's a long way from Woodstock and Barrington and Crystal Lake. And they said, we just can't handle any more than we're doing right here. They found a success, and they really, really did a job.
Yeah.
Just one more.
Uh-oh, this could be it. What, Tom?
Well, you had mentioned in the, as the station changed and we went into the talk format, and you had a program, if you recall, where you had, I think this guy was a fairly frequent guest, who was an antique expert.
Yes.
And the lady had called in and was asking about a clock that she had. And I think she identified it as a Seth Thomas. And in the course of her conversation, the expert said, well, what is wrong with it? And she said, well, it keeps perfectly good time, but it doesn't chime. Or to be specific, the dong doesn't. And so the guy says, all right, I recommend you take it to this dealer or that dealer. Both are very reputable. They should be able to fix the clock and tell you what's wrong with it, and they're not too expensive and so on. Now this fella, with all that experience and all of the people that he's known in this business, all the roués and rogues, I never have met a more naive man in my life. He can't let it alone. He comes back on and says, well, he says, we all have that problem. Sometimes we get up in the morning and our dog.
Thanks a lot.
I don't remember who was on the board, but he just disappeared. Now you begin to realize what you said and you giggle your way through the rest of this thing.
Delayed reaction.
The other thing I want to say is that I never met a man who ad-libbed a commercial or whatever as well as you, and there's an awful lot of talent been around this town for an awful lot of time. The other thing I remember is I hadn't been there too long, and I got in the later years, of course, of PBM. I just arrived. I was making, I think, $205 a week. Was space. And I had come from Ohio, where I was doing radio and TV, where I was making $200 a week. So I was struggling to put things together, what with the rentals and that kind of thing in Chicago. You came up to me one day, and about 2 weeks after I had been there, and said, I'm supposed to do a program, freelance kind of thing, little narration job for Joe Blow, whatever the studio was. And I can't make it, why don't you go do it for me? It pays $100. I never ran into anybody who would ever do that, and probably never would do that afterwards. But it sure was appreciated, and I don't know whether I ever thanked you properly for it now. And I loved your talk.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks to Mal. I'm going to ask PBN alumni to stick around for a few minutes, so maybe Chris can ask you a few questions. if that's
Still
all right.
make $205 a week.
I'll let him take it. Thank you all for coming. Thanks very much, Mal. Really an outstanding.
I love you all.